You haven't talked to your kids about drugs. Hey! Make an appointment.
Yo, Mom, you want to see me?
And if you don't know what to say, ask us. For a free parent's guide to drug prevention, call 1-800-624-0100.
Popular Mechanics presents stock car racing's most thrilling moments.
Hello everybody, I'm Benny Parsons, your host for this ESPN home video presentation of Popular Mechanics' most thrilling moments in the history of stock car racing. We're not just talking close finishes or spectacular crashes. Sure, this video is about moments that were thrilling, but also about milestones that molded the sport into the incredible nationwide phenomenon it is today. The moments that transcended the sport and have become cornerstones of a rich and incredible history. And I was there for a lot of those moments, sometimes behind the wheel during my 25-year career, and sometimes up in the booth for ESPN telecasts. And the ones I missed, man, I've heard about them so many times, it feels like I was there. And that feeling is what this video is all about. I want you to join me here in my living room as together we relive the greatest moments in the most competitive form of motorsports in the world, NASCAR Winston Cup stock car racing. And what better place to start than at the beginning, the 1959 Daytona 500. And no, wise guy, I wasn't there for that race. More than a race, a new era in stock car racing was beginning. After a decade of racing on the hard-packed sands of Daytona, the legendary founder of NASCAR, Big Bill France, had just completed his greatest undertaking, the building of the 2.5-mile Daytona International Speedway. It was the first high-banked oval any of the drivers had ever seen. Man, imagine what it felt like. These guys were used to racing Saturday nights on a quarter-mile dirt track carved out of a cornfield. All the greats of the day were there for the debut. Fireball Roberts, one of NASCAR's greatest talents, Curtis Turner, retired moonshine runner Junior Johnson, and defending series champion, always tough and sometimes crusty, Lee Petty. Now, maybe the most amazing thing about that first race was that despite the fact it was the first time any of these drivers had ever raced on a super speedway, there was not a single wreck and caution flag all day long as the 59 drivers battled for nearly 4 hours at an average speed of 135.521 miles per hour. But that doesn't mean the racing wasn't fierce and right down to the wire. The lead would change 33 times that day until two cars sprinted for the finish. And at first glance, it looked like Johnny Beauchamp and Lee Petty tied. The third car in the shot on the outside is Joe Weatherly. He's 2 laps down. Then Beauchamp was declared the winner. But this very photo was scrutinized, and it was 2 days later, 2 days, which might have seemed like a month the way Lee Petty was saying he won, that France reconsidered, and Petty was declared the victor after all.
Johnny Beauchamp, he and I were running on the last lap. And going out of the third turn, up fourth turn there, he went high and I went low. I went across the finish line and somebody said, well, how'd you know you won the race? I said, I looked out the window and I had to look back when I went across the finish line.
One eyewitness was a young crew chief named Dale Inman, working for a driver whose name we'll be hearing quite a bit, Richard Petty. Here's Dale's recollection.
And Weatherly was a lap down, and he was in the bunch with 3 of us. I'm sure there's been 10,000 pictures out of that finish. And he was trying to help Lee win the race because he was NASCAR and Beauchamp was kind of a foreigner. And Lee said sometimes he was trying to help, but at other times he was getting in the way. So I don't know. It turned out that we won the race, but they first give it to Beauchamp, and then there was so many amateur photographers that sent film in that they finally give us the race.
Felt real good. Felt real good. In fact, felt so good back then they didn't make much money. I got $11,000 for winning the 500 race. Now that's something, ain't it?
It may not have been pretty, but the controversy helped put the sport on the map. We'll see over and over again times when events surrounding the race as well as the race itself is what helped make certain moments magical and legendary. Now, over the years, the lanky son of Lee Petty, Richard, would own virtually every record in stock car racing and be a part of more than his share of amazing moments in the history of the sport. That's part of his incredible legacy, which can also be described as him being one tough cat to beat. It's 1979 at Darlington International Raceway. The track called the Lady in Black, or Too Tough to Tame. Richard was at the pinnacle of his career. And by the end of that season, he would have locked up his 7th Winston Cup championship. That afternoon, however, marked the changing of the guard and the establishment of a new superstar. It wasn't just a race. It was the passing of the baton. Darrell Waltrip was backing up his brass talk off the track with sensational performances on it. In his 4 years on the circuit, he'd already matched a few fenders with Richard, known then and now simply as the King. The race was the Rebel 500, Southern Pride, and a lot more was on the line. It was a classic duel of champions past and future.
Well, you can see it happening right before you. They're coming to turn 3. 2 more turns to go. Richard Petty still side by side. Donnie Allison is still hanging in 3rd. Oh! Richard Petty has got the lead. There comes Walter down below him as Petty stood up high. Donnie Allison trying to move past Petty into 2nd place. They're coming to the finish line. It is Darrell Waltrip winning the Rebel 500. Petty is 2nd.
Darrell and myself were racing, and at that time, I think Donnie Allison was 3rd, and he was back a pretty good race. So we got to racing each other. I'd pass on one lap or on one corner, and Darrell would pass me back on the straightaway or on the other corner. And we went back and forth, back and forth. We must have passed each other like a couple of times a lap for the last 3 or 4 laps.
This is back when the track was really treacherous. It was slick. They bear greased it all the time, and you really never raced anybody. You only raced the racetrack. Come down about 10 to go, and Richard hadn't really been all that good all day, but he caught me. And the first thing you know, Richard and Donnie Allison and I were in a real dogfight. And Richard and I were passing back and forth. We passed each other 4 times on the last lap at Darlington. And I mean, we never touched. It's not like we ran into each other, knocked each other out of the way. We literally, he passed me going down the front. I passed him in turn 1. He passed me in turn 2. We passed again going down the back. We passed again up in the middle of 3 and 4. And all the time, Donnie was sitting back here watching all this, knowing that if we screwed up, he had to race one. But anyway, we come down to the white flag, and as I said, we passed each other 4 times. And we go into the 3rd turn, and we're side by side. Richard's on the inside. He's got the preferred line. Donnie is lingering back just far enough so that when we crash, he can get through. We get to the 3rd turn. I run Richard in as far as I can run him, and then I just slam on the brakes. Richard goes in too hard. He goes up the hill. I turn hard left, get in the gas, drive between him and Donnie Allison, pass Richard because he's about to hit the wall, get the lead, win the race.
He just wound up being in the lead on the right time. If it'd been another lap, I'd have probably been in the lead. It's very exciting. It was a super race. You know what I mean? Even though you run second, you teed off at yourself for letting somebody beat you, but you know you was in a race and you know you did as good as you could, and you know you felt real good about it.
Man, that kind of racing just takes your breath away, and I was there. Richard would go on to more victories, but it would be his last championship season. Waltrip, however, would go on to win 3 NASCAR titles, and you've got to believe that beating the best ever that day, with Richard still at the top of his game, gave Darrell the inner proof that he was as good as he was telling everybody he was, and he made a believer out of me. Now for our next moment, it's back to Daytona, the Daytona 500. The year is 1979. In those days, it was Petty, Waltrip, and guys like David Pearson, Donnie and Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough and Benny Parsons. Yeah, that's me, battling for victory at the Super Bowl of racing. Sometimes things got out of hand.
They're out of turn 2. They're down the backstretch. Here goes Cale on the inside. Cale makes the move. He's down very close to the grass. Donnie tries to shut him off. Cale's in the grass. Cale loses it. He tries to pull it back. Donnie side by side. They make contact. Both head toward the wall. They hit the wall in turn number 3. We'll have a new leader.
Yarborough and the Allisons were fierce competitors, but that finish led to chaos. And that Richard Petty fellow, well, he snuck away with his 6th Daytona 500.
I had Donnie set up just like I wanted him for that last lap slingshot, and when I came down to go by him, he came down too, and finally got me off in the dirt there at 200 miles an hour, and I had no control over the car, and came back on the racetrack and tangled us both up, put us both in the wall, and there Richard was a half a lap back and went on to victory lane. Yeah, I was upset. There wasn't a fist fight. There was a little shoving match. It should have been a fist fight. But, you know, those things happen in the world of sports. Donnie Allison is one of my best friends. Bobby Allison is one of my best friends. Those things happen. It happened that day, but we've been friends ever since. As a matter of fact, I'm an honorary member of the Alabama gang. We just had a little misunderstanding that one day, and those things happen.
The incredible thing, that was the second time those guys had spun out that day. Early in the race, the track was a little damp. Cale, Donnie, and Bobby got together, spun coming off the second corner. Cale and Donnie was able to get their cars going without losing any time. Bobby lost a couple of laps, and that's what kept him out of competition for winning the race. How do I know they spun out? Because they did it right in front of me. I missed them about that far. And perhaps no race showcased the competitive nature and commitment to winning as that 500. Now, the way we're telling it, old Richard just showed up at Daytona and took the checkered flag, which he did an incredible 7 times in his career. But in stock car racing, there's no such thing as a free ride. Keep your eye on number 43 from the summer race in 1990.
Look at Richard Petty coming up on the inside.
Come on, King. What are you doing down there?
He's showing muscle early in the race. On the first lap, he goes 3 wide into turn number 3 with Greg Sachs in the middle and Derek Pope on the outside. And here we go into the 4th corner now.
Boy, somebody's got to give there.
3 abreast racing. Look at this. Coming out of corner number 4, they touch. All 3 cars are touching as they come down through the tri-oval, but everybody maintains position.
Wow.
Oh, no, Sachs is in trouble.
And takes Petty with him.
And we're going to have a terrific crash here as nearly all the field is going to be involved in this crash. There are only about 10 or 12 cars that survived this melee just past the starting line.
But there's one crash that stands out in my mind. It's February 14th, 1988, Valentine's Day. Richard Petty is making his 29th appearance in the 500-mile race, when all of a sudden, a hushed crowd watched in disbelief as the 43 car tumbles and shatters down the front stretch. It was the day everyone thought the king was dead.
I got more publicity out of that one wreck than winning 7 Daytonas, because every sports program you'd see for the next week or 2 weeks, they would have to show that leading in or leading out of a sports deal. So we got a lot of publicity out of it, but the big deal was I was able to walk away from it. That was a situation that you just look at and say, well, the good Lord just didn't want you to go that time. He was wanting you to be spectacular, but he wasn't ready to take you.
They were replaying it on a closed circuit TV, and I stopped, and all at once it hit me that this was Richard in this car, and it was just flipping and coming apart, and even when it stopped in the middle of the track, he took a tremendous impact again. And I thought, the first thought in my mind was that they're not being truthful here. You know, I know he must be dead. I walked back to the area where they had brought him in, and there he lay. And he smiled, and there was not a scratch on his body.
The fact that Richard could survive that crash and the way that most drivers walk away from most wrecks is a tribute to the safety of our sport. I still wouldn't take Richard's ride for $1 million, though I certainly have some ideas for using the money. And it's not a dilemma I'm ever going to have to worry about. But one man who found himself contemplating what he'd do with that kind of money was Awesome Bill from Dawsonville, Bill Elliott, when he found himself running for the Winston Million. It's stock car racing's Grand Slam. Win 3 of the 4 crown jewels on the Winston Cup circuit. That's the Daytona 500, the Winston 500 at Talladega, the Coca-Cola 600 in Charlotte, and the Darlington Southern 500, and collect a cool $1 million. In 1985, Bill Elliott found himself en route to that extraordinary feat. First, he won the Daytona 500, setting himself up for a run at the money. 3 months later, averaging a blistering 186.788 miles per hour, he took the checkered flag at the Winston 500. By the way, he sat on the pole at that race with a speed nearly 210 miles per hour. In Charlotte, a few weeks later, awesome was the only way to describe the redhead from Dawsonville. But a blown master cylinder ended his dream. For the next 4 months, the pressure kept building. Everywhere he went, he was in the shadow of the Winston Million. It was tough for the shy guy from rural Georgia, and the pressure was made worse by the fact he was locked in a fierce points battle for the championship with Darrell Waltrip, who was earning his off-the-track nickname, Jaws. Last shot, Labor Day, the Darlington Southern 500, and he went for it, qualifying on the pole, which only added to enormous pressure, both from within and from the fans and the media. It was an unprecedented event in the history of stock car racing.
Bill Elliott is racing into the record books. Bill Elliott is going toward immortality. Bill Elliott gets the checkered flag. Bill Elliott has won an additional $1 million in 1985.
I'll tell you what, I couldn't believe it. When Winston put the money up last November or December, I couldn't believe that I'd be the one that was able to get it. I'll tell you what, I can't believe it.
So I was sitting in New York at the end of '84 thinking, man, that'd be great just to be able to go for it. I'd never won at Daytona. I'd never won at some of the places. And here I go, win Daytona, win Talladega, and then win at Darlington. I think when that race was over was, win, lose, or draw, it was definitely relief. And it was tough to prepare for because I went through the same circumstance at Charlotte, 5 months earlier, and it was kind of a total disaster, or not even that much earlier. But, it seems like since then, I guess the closest person's been to get that, it's been Earnhardt, and I guess a couple of laps at Daytona would have been whether he got that money or not.
An incredible performance. But ironically, while he did win the million, it was Waltrip who went on to win the championship. Bill didn't get all the victories, but his 3 key ones were definitely for the money. But I want to let you in on a little secret. Sure, Bill wanted the money, but when you're behind the wheel of a stock car going 200 miles per hour, you're not thinking about money. If that was your nature, you wouldn't be out there. You couldn't be out there. You've got to love the speed, the incredible competition, the challenge of putting yourself to the test to see what you've got. It's about courage, honor, and at the risk of sounding too dramatic, the warrior spirit. That's what it takes. And if I had to point to one race where determination, guts, and desire was laid out on the line in a single dramatic confrontation, I'd point to a chilly Atlanta afternoon in November 1992. Crew members worked feverishly. At the end of the grueling stock car racing season, it had come down to a single final race when 6 men had a shot at NASCAR's ultimate prize, the Winston Cup Championship. Fate seemed to have finally smiled on Davey Allison. The points leader had endured a horrific season, which included this horrendous crash at Pocono. And the tragic death of his brother Clifford in a racing accident. He came to Atlanta, the points leader, needed only to finish 6th or better to join his father as a champion. Kyle Petty, Mark Martin, and Harry Gant had mathematical shots at the championship, but they would need the leaders to fall out early to have a shot. But 2 other men held much of their fate in their own hands, Bill Elliott and Alan Kowicki, who were 2nd and 3rd in points. If either was to have a shot, they would have to push their machines and themselves to the max. But there was another drama also being played out that day. After more than 30 years and 200 victories, the king, Richard Petty, was retiring. And looking ahead, his court of fans wondered if the 21-year-old sensation from Indiana, Jeff Gordon, who was making his debut that day, would someday wear the crown. Man, he was so excited, I could barely stand it. You couldn't make this stuff up. And if you did, nobody would believe you. As the race drew near, the energy at the track grew intense. And in the garage, the cars were rolled out to the grid and drivers dashed to their cars. Last out of the garage area was Alan Kowicki. Then came the command. Richard Petty led the field through the warm-up laps, then fell back to his position on the grid. I got to tell you, I had chills. It was unbelievable. I didn't know it then, but it was only getting started.
Oh, and we have a spin. Bodine is in the fence, so is Rick Mast.
Oh, no! Davey got through. Kyle Petty got through. I think I saw Alan Kowicki on the bottom of the racetrack getting through.
The points leaders barely made it through the wreck, and the battle raged on until lap 95 when a multi-car accident collected Petty, who finished his career in a blaze.
Oh, a crash down the front straightaway.
Ken Schrader, Wally Dolan back.
Darrell Walker's involved.
And Richard Petty is flaming going into turn number 1.
He's knocked the oil cooler off his car, and the oil is on fire.
Richard Petty, the car is on fire. Petty has got the car stopped.
It'll extinguisher.
An era was over, and Jeff Gordon, the potential heir, began his learning curve. But the championship battle was getting fiercer. Allison was holding a slight edge, but then the fates, which had been so cruel to the young man from Hueytown, struck again.
Oh, crash! Davey Allison is in the crash, Bob.
Oh, Ernie Irvin, and it's all over for Davey Allison.
No, it's not over yet. I don't think he hit him that hard, maybe.
Well, he hit pretty well, I think.
He's got a lot of damage to the right side of the car.
Ernie Irvin spinning, coming off of corner number 4.
Davey has got his car moving.
Yeah, he's trying to pull away.
But he can't steer it.
But it won't turn.
It won't turn. The right front will not work.
Davey was never one to mope. He mustered a wave of thanks to the crowd as he saw his championship hopes disappear.
That's just the way it goes sometimes. We had some troubles, and we're trying to work our way back up there, just trying to run a smart race. And ran over something in turn 3 earlier in the race, and we had to come in and repair the car from that. We caught a lucky caution flag, and I thought, all right, we're going to be okay now. And then I saw Ernie get loose over there in 4, and we just ran out of room.
Up front, however, an incredible battle began unfolding. It would come down to this. After 29 races, countless miles, whoever led the most laps in this one race would have the championship. Both drivers knew there was no holding back. Man, I was calling the race, but I couldn't stand it. It was so exciting. Kowicki's crew chief did the math. On lap 310, Kowicki got the advantage he needed to clinch the title if he could just survive the day.
Bill Elliott comes off the 4th corner. He wins the Hooters 500. But Alan Kowicki is coming off of corner number 4, knowing that he's winning the championship. There's the checkered flag for Alan. He's the champion for 92.
This championship's what I wanted, and I just, thank God for the fortune to be here and to be an American and compete on the Winston Cup circuit, man. When I moved down south years ago, this was my dream. We ran great. I led the most laps. I knew how far I had to go in a race to lead the most laps, and at that point, there was no way that he could beat me.
Alan Kowicki, the first owner-driver to win the title since Petty did it in 1979. The first champion with a college degree, and the first from north of the Mason-Dixon line, was Winston Cup champ. He took his Polish victory lap, and we now know it's one we'll never forget, as it was his last. But it will always remind me that underdogs can finish first, and that it marked the beginning of opening the sport to a whole new generation of fans and a new era in stock car racing.
To see Kowicki's team calculate exactly how many laps he had to lead in order to get the 5 points bonus for leading the most lap, and he did that right to the lap, didn't have any cushion whatsoever. What if somebody had misfigured? I mean, that's drama when you come down that way. And it was an exciting event. Not so exciting as far as racing for the win down to the finish line, but you were racing for the big prize, in this case, the championship.
What a great finish. But NASCAR history is filled with close finishes.
Let's see what happens on the last lap. Again, it is Davey Allison.
Oh, Sterling
Marlin spins off of corner number 2. Sterling Marlin spins down the backstretch. Here comes Mark Martin trying to make a move off of corner number 4. It's a drag race. Wow. A photo finish. I think Davey Allison won, but I wouldn't say for sure. Off the 18 degrees of banking, they go down on 5 degrees of banking, and Dale Jarrett wiggles a little bit as they come out of the second corner. They bump, they touch, they rub, going down the backstretch, side by side, wheel to wheel. Who is it going to be in the Champion Spark Plug 400? Jarrett has the slight advantage as they go into the third and fourth corners. Davey Allison battles back on the outside. It's going to be a photo finish. They touch coming down through the triangle at the line. Who wins it? I believe
You know, NASCAR racing is a family affair. It's not uncommon for drivers and their teams to be part of second and even third generations of fans and families. And in some cases, those little kids who I saw growing up as little track rats became tough, big-time racers. And one race in particular showcased a pair of big-name boys going for it big time. It was the Winston 1992. They billed it as one hot night. And for once, the reality outstripped the hype. No points at stake, just big bucks in NASCAR's all-star race. And for the first time, it was being held under the lights at the Charlotte Motor Speedway. The atmosphere electric. And providing the juice were two very familiar names, Petty and Allison. Only this time, it would be Kyle and Davey. Davey sat on the pole, won the first 30-lap race, dominating the heat, and earning $100,000 in the process. The field was inverted for the next 30-lap dash, thus Allison was sent to the rear of the pack. Kyle Petty emerged on lap 4 to take the lead and win the second heat. Allison finished 6th. 10 laps were all that remained in the final segment for $200,000, and more importantly, bragging rights. Earnhardt, whose dad was a top and tough racer, muscled his way past Irvin for second as Petty leaped to a substantial lead. On lap 3, the caution flew as Darrell Waltrip spun and stalled, erasing Petty's advantage. Allison had moved to third, making it Petty, Earnhardt, and Allison on the restart of the remaining 7 laps. At the white flag, Earnhardt had the lead. Petty was a close second, and Davey was right behind. Down the backstretch, Petty put the move on Dale Earnhardt. He reacted by nearly taking Petty into the backstretch grass. Going into turn 3, Earnhardt hit the corner first and lost control. Petty lifted to gather his Pontiac. But while Petty checked up, Allison continued and got a strong drive off forward. He pulled to the inside of Petty in the middle of the tri-oval and had the momentum. They touched twice before Allison inched ahead to take the checker. They touched again as they crossed the start-finish line, sending the 28 car wild into the wall. The crowd stood for over an hour, still stunned at what they had seen.
I think we were both so relieved to get to the start-finish line that we just both let up a little bit. And when we did, we both got together one more time and Davey wrecked. And, you know, I don't think there's been any race ever where that much excitement happened in that short a period of time. When you look at a 1.5 mile track, you're saying, okay, the last half mile of the race, you had 2 wrecks, everybody was spinning, crashing. So it was pretty exciting. It was exciting for me anyhow.
Dale did what he had to do, and Kyle did what he had to do. Probably should have done a little bit more, but he did what he had to do at the time. And Davey took advantage of it, and it was frustrating to lose the race, but it was a great thing to be involved with. That was just a super night.
It was really scary to know how hard he hit that wall. He hit it on the driver's side. And myself and Joey and a couple of the guys was the first one to him down there in turn 1. And that's probably the scariest I've been, because when I got down there and that car was tore up as bad as it was, and he was slumped over, I mean, I just knew he was hurt really bad. It just didn't dawn on me that maybe he's just knocked out, because I had saw him hit that wall driver's side, and I know it's a bad deal, but I just remember him finally looking up at me and giving me that thumbs up, and then I knew that even though it probably wasn't going to be me that was going to have to be put in that helicopter and carried out of there, that it was all worth it, you know, because that's what we worked so hard for, and he drove his guts out, was to win.
David would celebrate in the hospital for a couple of days, but would be okay.
I knew that we were going to crash just as soon as the two cars touched the final time. And I knew that we were going to hit the outside wall, and I grabbed the hold of the steering wheel as hard as I could. But still, a 175-mile-an-hour impact on the left side that's a pretty serious impact. And to be honest with you, I shouldn't have walked away from that. I shouldn't have been able to get out of that car with assistance from others, and be alert of what was going on, and only have to spend the night in the hospital one night. That's a pretty serious impact, and I was pretty lucky that night.
That was not his time. But tragically, 1 year later, his time would come as a helicopter crash at Talladega Speedway claimed his life. Sometimes a victory is at once historic and dramatic, and that's what makes the finish for the next race, without question, one of the most thrilling of all time. By 1984, the career of the great Richard Petty needed one more achievement to be complete. Decades of racing had earned him 199 victories, to this day dwarfing his nearest competitor, but still one checkered flag shy of the number that would bookend his career, 200. Man, I won 21 races in 19 years of Winston Cup racing. Everyone was tough, dirt tough. On July 4th, 1984 in Daytona, well, no one could have written a better Hollywood script, except if you were Cale Yarborough that day.
200th win, July the 4th, President of the United States. You win it on the last lap. I mean, you know, it was everything that you would ever want to get into one race. We put it all together in one day. At that time, Cale was running super good, and I was running super good, so we got to racing with each other and come down to the last 4 or 5 laps. You know, we've been changing the lead, and I think we just got in line, and he was following me, waiting for the last lap.
As the laps wound down, Richard's chance for immortality appeared when a caution flag came out. Now, most people don't know this, but I caused that caution when I made contact with Doug Hebron, and he flipped in the tri-oval. It was a dash for the yellow flag between Richard and Cale Yarborough that would make history.
We ran side by side down the front stretch, and I had the inside groove on it, and we touched a few times, but anyhow, when we got to the start-finish line, I beat him by a couple of 3 feet.
I had him set up right exactly where I wanted him, waiting for that final lap. Slingshot him to the finish there, and the caution flag came out with 3 laps to go. I said, this thing's gonna finish under caution. I gotta go now. I don't have time to set him up like I would have if it was 2 laps later. And so I made a run at him and got by him down the backstretch, but didn't have enough momentum to stay in front of him, you know, till we got to the start-finish line. He beat me just a foot, and that was a tough one to lose because I had him just where I wanted him, even though I'm glad, you know, that he won his 200th. But and the bad thing about that, Benny, was I knew whoever got back to the start-finish line was the winner of the race. Well, my brain jumped out of gear. It was 2 laps left, see? So the next lap, thinking, you know, well, he beat me, the race is over. I came down pit road and still had a lap to go. Went from 2nd to 4th, I think.
We was able to pull it off and never pulled any more of them off, but I guess we used up all our luck in that one race.
I feel kind of bad for Cale that he's remembered as the guy who lost to Richard for Victory 200, because Cale is without question one of the greatest, toughest, hard-nosed, and winningest drivers in the history of the sport, a man I admire. But you can't really say enough about Richard's 200 wins. It's a record that I believe will stand forever. When you look at all the variables, longevity, parity, technology, and the fewer number of races run today, it just doesn't seem possible that anyone will ever surpass the king, which is how it ought to be, wouldn't you say? But folks, it's been great sitting here with you and reliving these great times. But we left out so much, plus history is being created every Sunday as drivers go out and take to the racetrack and do whatever it takes to take home the checkered flag. We'll be back with more thrilling moments soon, and until then, take care. I'll see you at the racetrack.
Hey race fans, now you have a chance to gain an advantage, the NASCAR Advantage. This unique plan includes 24-hour emergency road service, including free towing, jump starts, tire changes, lockout service, emergency concierge service, customized trip routing, auto theft and hit and run reward, lost key tag return service, hotel and car rental discounts, and much, much more. Plus, you'll receive another peace of mind, spouse coverage at no extra charge. RV program also available. Watch for future NASCAR race fan benefits. To order by credit card, call 1-800-285-5656 or write to NASCAR Advantage, Post Office Box 5100, Thousand Oaks, California, 91359. Who better to bring you a complete national road service plan than NASCAR, the road service experts? Get the NASCAR Advantage today.